I always thought the end of my life would be gentle. After all the years of hard work, all the sacrifices I made to raise my daughter, I imagined growing old in the house I built brick by brick with my late husband. I imagined the kitchen filled with laughter, the garden blooming under the same sun that once warmed her childhood. I thought she would sit by my side, maybe with her own children, and remind me that everything I gave up was worth it. But instead, I was staring out of the window of a van, my hands trembling on my lap, while my daughter, Clara, tapped on her phone in the driver's seat, as though this was just another errand to check off her list. "Mom, it'll be fine," she said flatly without looking at me. "This place is modern, clean. They'll take good care of you." Her voice was sharp, businesslike, not the voice of a child comforting her mother, but of someone delivering news they had already decided on long ago. I swallowed the lump in my throat. "But Clara, I don't need strangers to care for me. I just need my home, my own bed, my garden." "You can't manage on your own anymore," she interrupted, sighing as if my words were a burden. "The house is too big, too much upkeep, and frankly, it's not safe for you. You should think of this as an upgrade." Her words stabbed deeper than she realized. An upgrade, as if stripping me from the walls that held my memories could be equated to a hotel booking. I pressed my lips together, trying to gather the strength not to cry. The van pulled into a long driveway lined with manicured hedges. Ahead, a building rose that looked more like a sterile hotel than a home. Wide glass doors, a fountain that gurgled cheerlessly, everything too polished, too impersonal. When we stepped inside, the scent of antiseptic clung to the air. A receptionist greeted us with a practiced smile, handing Clara a clipboard of forms. Clara signed swiftly, barely glancing at me. "This way, Mrs. Thompson," a nurse said, touching my elbow lightly. Her kindness should have been comforting, but it only deepened my humiliation. I wasn't sick. I wasn't dying. I was just unwanted. They led me down a long corridor lined with identical doors. Behind some, I could hear muffled coughs, the shuffle of wheelchairs, the distant drone of a television. My room was small, neat, already impersonal bed dresser, a chair by the window, a vase of artificial flowers sat on the nightstand, their plastic sheen mocking the roses I once grew in my backyard. Clara placed my suitcase on the bed and smoothed her skirt. She didn't meet my eyes. "You'll be comfortable here, Mum. And don't worry, I'll handle the house, the bills, the maintenance, everything. You just focus on settling in." Her words lingered. "I'll handle the house." Suddenly, I understood. This wasn't about my safety, or my health, or even convenience. This was about control, about property, about money. "Clara," I whispered, my voice breaking, "is this what it's really about? The house?" For the first time, she looked at me directly, and in her eyes, I didn't see my daughter, the child who once clung to my skirt when thunder frightened her. I saw a woman calculating her inheritance. "You can't keep it forever," she said coldly. "It's better if I take care of it now, before it falls apart." "I'm just being practical." Practical, another word that sliced through me like glass. I sank into the chair by the window, the weight of betrayal pressing down on my chest. I remembered the nights I stayed awake sewing her clothes when money was tight, the meals I skipped so she could eat, the long shifts at the diner, the aching feet, the whispered prayers that she would grow into someone kind, someone grateful. And this was what those years had bought me, a one-way ticket to a nursing home. She kissed the air near my cheek, never touching me, and picked up her purse. "I'll visit when I can. You'll see, this is for the best." Then she was gone. The door clicked shut, leaving me in silence so thick it choked me. My eyes drifted to the window. Outside, a handful of residents sat in the courtyard, their faces tired, their eyes hollow. I saw myself reflected in their posture, discarded, sidelined, waiting for days to pass. Tears blurred my vision, and I pressed my palms together, whispering to the empty room, "Is this what my life was worth? Is this the ending I deserve?" The questions hung heavy in the air. My heart twisted, not just from sorrow but from shame. How could my own daughter, the very reason I endured decades of sacrifice, treat me like an obstacle to be removed? I thought of my husband, gone so many years now, and the promise we once made that our daughter would always know she was loved, that she would never feel alone. We had believed love would be enough. But now I sat abandoned, stripped of dignity, and wondered if love had been a one-way street all along. As night fell, shadows stretched across the sterile walls of my new room. I curled under the stiff blanket, the faint sounds of the nursing home echoing through the halls. Somewhere, a woman cried softly, Somewhere else, a television buzzed. I closed my eyes, and in the darkness, one truth burned brighter than all the pain. Clara had betrayed me, and betrayal, I knew, was not the end of the story. It was the beginning. That night, I couldn't sleep. The thin mattress felt foreign, the sheets smelled faintly of bleach, and the silence was broken only by the occasional shuffle of feet in the hallway. My body was in the nursing home, but my mind drifted far away. 2 years I had tried not to think about in so long. Memories came rushing back, uninvited yet unstoppable. I was 29 when I lost my husband. The day began like any other. He kissed my forehead before leaving for work, promising to bring home groceries and a smile. But that evening, 2 policemen stood at my door, hats in hand, their faces carrying the kind of pity that steals your breath. A car accident, they said. A drunk driver. Just like that, the man I had built my world around was gone. I remember collapsing to the floor, my little Clara clutching my skirt, confused by my sobs. She was only 6. She didn't understand why her father wasn't coming home, why I suddenly seemed smaller, weaker. That night, as she slept curled against me, I promised her through tears and trembling lips that I would carry both our weights, that I would give her everything. But promises cost more than words. I took the first job I could find, waiting tables at the diner down the street. The hours were long, the pay meager, but it kept food on the table. Soon, it wasn't enough. I cleaned offices at night, scrubbing floors while the city slept. Some mornings, I walked Clara to school with my apron still smelling of grease, my hands raw from chemicals. I was exhausted, but I told myself exhaustion was a small price for her smile. There were days when I wanted to collapse, days when my body screamed for rest, but then I would see her, sitting on the porch with her homework spread across her lap, and I'd remember why I was fighting. I was determined that she would never feel the sting of scarcity, never know the ache of an empty stomach the way I did as a child. I remember one Christmas vividly. Money was so tight that I couldn't afford both the heating bill and gifts. The nights had grown bitterly cold, the kind that seep into your bones. I chose warmth over toys. But on Christmas Eve, I stitched together a doll from old fabric scraps, embroidering a face by candlelight. When I placed it in her hands the next morning, Clara's eyes lit up as if I had given her the world. "Did you make this, Mummy?" she asked, hugging it close. I nodded, tears stinging my eyes. "Every stitch, sweetheart. She's yours." She named it Rose and carried it everywhere for years. That memory once filled me with pride, but lying in the sterile room of the nursing home, I wondered if she even remembered Rosor, the hands that bled to create it. As Clara grew older, my sacrifices only deepened. I turned down promotions that required longer hours because I didn't want her to feel alone. I gave up the dream of finishing college, shelving books and ambitions in dusty corners of my mind. I clipped coupons, stretched meals, and patched clothes so she could attend school trips, buy the shoes all the other girls wore, feel like she belonged. I still remember the night of her high school graduation. I sat in the bleachers, clapping until my hands stung, my heart swelling as she crossed the stage. She wore a bright red dress we could barely afford, but she looked radiant, her future shimmering before her. Afterward, she hugged me tight and whispered, "I'll make you proud, Mom. I promise." That promise had been the anchor of my soul for years. And now, in this place where promises dissolved like mist, I wondered if she had ever meant it. The memory shifted again, this time to her college days. I worked 2 jobs to pay her tuition, refusing to let her graduate with the crushing debt I had seen others drown beneath. I skipped doctor's appointments, ignored my aching knees, and told myself there would be time to rest later. Later never came. On the day she graduated, she barely introduced me to her friends. "This is my mum," she said quickly, almost dismissively, as though I were an accessory instead of the reason she stood there in cap and gown. Still, I smiled, swallowing the sting, because pride outweighed pain in that moment. Then came the wedding. She married into wealth, a man whose family name carried weight. I stood at the back of the grand hall, wearing a dress I had saved months to buy, watching as she danced beneath chandeliers. People congratulated me, telling me what a fine daughter I had raised, what a bright future she had. I smiled politely, but inside I felt the distance between us growing, like a bridge slowly crumbling. The years after the wedding were lonelier. Clara called less, visited only on holidays. When she did, her conversations revolved around investments, vacations, and her new circle of friends. I tried to share pieces of my world, but she always seemed distracted, impatient. And now, Here I was locked away in a nursing home she had chosen without my consent, under the pretense of care. The same child for whom I had given everything now treated me as though I were a burden to be discarded. The contrast twisted inside me like a knife. I remembered standing in the cold, waiting for the bus to my night job, snowflakes melting on my lashes, thinking only of how to keep her warm. I remembered walking barefoot in the kitchen so she could have the only pair of slippers. I remembered holding her through fevers, soothing her nightmares, and praying over her while she slept. And now, she couldn't even look me in the eyes when she signed away my freedom. I pressed a hand to my chest, the ache too deep for tears alone. All those years, all those sacrifices, I whispered to the empty room. Did they mean nothing to her? The silence gave no answer, but my heart already knew. The betrayal cut deeper because of the sacrifices. If I had been selfish, if I had lived for myself, perhaps I could accept this outcome. But I had lived for her, every choice, every hardship, every sleepless night, always for her. Now, staring at the artificial flowers on the nightstand, I realized I had traded my life for hers, and she had traded me for convenience. The weight of that truth pressed down on me until I thought I might break. But somewhere, buried beneath the grief, a small ember of anger flickered. Betrayal can hollow you, but it can also awaken you. And in that moment, I knew the story was far from over. The first week in the nursing home felt like stepping into a world where time no longer flowed forward but instead looped endlessly, day after day. With no distinction between morning and night, the air was always the same, sterile, faintly sour, heavy with disinfectant. The halls echoed with the shuffle of slippers, the squeak of wheelchairs, and the low hum of televisions left on to drown out silence. Each morning, a nurse would knock politely before stepping into my room, her tone professional yet detached. "Mrs. Thompson, time for breakfast." As if the act of eating needed supervision, I used to brew my own coffee, the aroma filling my kitchen while sunlight danced on the curtains. Now I was handed a plastic cup of lukewarm tea and eggs that tasted of nothing. At first, I resisted. I told myself this was temporary, that Clara would realize her mistake, that she would come back and take me home. But as the days stretched, my hope thinned like the watery soup they served for lunch. What cut deepest wasn't the food or the rigid routines, it was the way I felt stripped of dignity. Every action was monitored, every decision made for me. I was no longer a woman with a past, a mother with sacrifices, a person with choices. I was a patient, a number on a chart. I soon learned that the others around me carried stories just as heavy. There was Margaret, a sharp-eyed woman with silver hair who had once been a She told me how her son convinced her to downsize after her husband passed, only to sell her house and pocket the money. Now she sat by the window every day, knitting scarves that no one came to collect. "He says he's busy," she murmured to me one afternoon, her hands moving steadily. "But I think he's just busy forgetting me." Then there was Henry, a quiet man in his 80s whose daughter had promised to visit every Sunday. He dressed neatly each week, sitting in the common room with polished shoes, waiting. Hours would pass, the sun would set, and she never came. Still, the next Sunday, he would sit again, hopeful as before. She'd come next time, he'd whisper, though even he seemed unsure. Listening to them was like listening to echoes of my own pain. We were different people with different pasts, yet we shared the same wound. Children who had turned away when we needed them most. The evenings were the hardest. After dinner, the halls grew quiet, save for the occasional cough or cry from another room. I would lie in bed staring at the ceiling, memories pressing against me like waves. I thought of my home, the worn armchair by the fireplace, the ticking of the old clock, the smell of the roses in the garden. I wondered if Clara had already begun changing things, if she had filled the house with furniture that erased my touch. One night, I asked a nurse if I could have a small plant for my room, something living. She smiled kindly but shook her head. "Regulations, I'm afraid. Allergies, safety." I nodded, but inside, I felt another piece of myself slipping away. Even the comfort of nurturing life was denied me. Clara visited twice in those first weeks. The first time, she breezed in with papers for me to sign. "It's just some formalities regarding the utilities," she said, tapping her pen impatiently. I skimmed the pages, realizing they gave her authority over the house accounts. When I hesitated, she sighed. "Mom, don't make this difficult. I'm doing this for you." Reluctantly, I signed, though my heart screamed in protest. The ink on that page felt like chains tightening. The second visit was no warmer. She brought a bag of toiletries, dropped them on the dresser, and answered to phone calls during the 10 minutes she spent with me. When I tried to tell her how lonely I felt, she waved me off. You're just adjusting. Give it time. Besides, this is what's best. What's best? The phrase had become her shield, her excuse. But best for whom? Certainly not for me. After she left, I sat with Margaret and Henry in the common room. We didn't need many words. Our silence spoke louder than conversation. Each of us carried an ache too deep for constant expression. Yet being together, even in shared sorrow, was better than being alone. It was during one of these evenings that Margaret said something that stayed with me. She leaned close, her voice a raspy whisper. We gave them everything, and when they grew strong, they forgot who built the foundation they stand on. Her words hit me like a hammer. That was the truth, stripped bare. Our love had been unconditional, but theirs had come with limits. And when those limits were reached, we became expendable. The realization settled heavily inside me, but it also stirred something else, a flicker of defiance. I wasn't ready to be forgotten. Not yet. One morning, while sipping the bitter coffee substitute they called breakfast, I looked around the dining hall. Rows of bowed heads, tired faces, stories of abandonment etched in every wrinkle, and I thought, this is not how my story will end. Clara might have placed me here, thinking she had secured her path to my house, my belongings, my legacy, but she underestimated me. She saw me as weak, stripped of power, tucked away. What she didn't realize was that even in this place, even diminished and discarded, I still had something she couldn't take: my will, my choices, my power to decide what happens after I am gone. That thought took root, stubborn and alive. It was the first spark of hope I'd felt in weeks. But for now, I played along with the routines, moving through the gray days of the nursing home. I listened to the stories of Margaret and Henry, held their hands when their voices trembled, and allowed them to hold mine when I broke. Together, we became silent witnesses to one another's betrayals, a fragile community stitched together by pain. And every time Clara failed to visit, every time she brushed me aside, my resolve hardened. She believed she had won. She believed I was too weak to fight back. She was wrong. It was on a Thursday afternoon when the veil finally lifted. The nursing home smelled of lemon polish that day, the staff bustling about with their usual rehearsed cheer. I had taken my seat in the common lounge, pretending to read a magazine, though my mind was far away. That was when I heard her voice, Clara. My heart leaped at the sound, an involuntary spark of hope igniting in my chest. Perhaps she had come just to see me, to sit and talk, to remember I was her mother, not just a responsibility on paper. I rose slowly, steadying myself with the arm of the chair, and followed the sound of her heels clicking down the hall. She wasn't alone. As I approached the corner, I realized she was on the phone. Her voice carried in the quiet corridor, sharp and confident, like a woman closing a business deal. I stopped, hidden behind the wall, every instinct telling me to listen. Yes, she said, laughing lightly. It's all handled now. Mom's settled in the nursing home, so the house is practically mine. I've got power of attorney for the utilities, and once I transfer the accounts, it'll be seamless. Her words struck me like a slap. The house hers. I pressed a hand against the wall to steady myself, bile rising in my throat. No, she doesn't argue much, Clara continued, her tone dismissive. She's too frail, too sentimental, to realize what's happening. It's better this way, less messy. Honestly, she should thank me. I'll make better use of the property than she ever could. There was laughter on the other end of the call, muffled but cruel. Clara laughed too, a sound that chilled me. Exactly, she said. With the house under my name, I can finally get that renovation done. We might even list it in a few years. Its prime location. You should see the market right now. It's perfect. My chest tightened, each word slicing deeper than the last. So it was true. Every suspicion I had nursed in the quiet of my room, every whisper of doubt that perhaps she had put me here, not for care but for convenience now, confirmed in the cruelest way. I thought back to her cold reassurances. This is for the best. It's just practical. I had wanted to believe that somewhere behind her clipped tone was love, however hidden, but no. It was never about love. It was about ownership, about control, about money. I pressed myself further into the shadow, terrified she might notice me, yet unable to tear myself away. Of course, I'll visit now and then, Clara said breezily, just to keep up appearances, but honestly, it's easier this way. Less drama, and the sooner I handle the finances, the smoother everything will be later. Later, the word dripped with meaning. Later, when I was gone, her laughter trailed off as the call ended, her heels clicking again, as she walked toward the exit. I stayed frozen, my nails digging into the plaster wall, my body trembling as if every bone had turned to glass. She hadn't seen me, she hadn't cared enough to notice. When the hallway emptied, I sank onto a nearby bench, the tears spilling freely now. Not the tears of sorrow I had shed so often these past weeks. These were different, hotter, sharper, fueled not by despair but by rage. All the sacrifices, all the sleepless nights, the aching bones, the meals skipped, the dreams abandoned, every ounce of myself I had poured into her life, and she reduced it all to property, a transaction, a means to her comfort. I thought of my husband's voice, years ago, when we sat at the kitchen table late into the night making plans. The house will be her legacy, he had said, eyes warm with hope. It will remind her of where she came from. It will anchor her. What would he say now, seeing how she twisted that legacy into entitlement? I wiped my eyes, anger steadying me like steel forming under fire. Clara thought she had won. She thought I was too old, too weak, too broken to fight. She believed she could erase me quietly, replace my presence with paperwork. But she was wrong. Later that evening, Margaret sat with me in the lounge, her knitting needles clicking softly. She glanced up at me, noticing the storm on my face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," she said. "Worse," I murmured. "I've seen the truth." She didn't press, just nodded, her wise eyes filled with silent understanding. She, too, had been betrayed by blood. She, too, knew the sting of being reduced to nothing by the very people she had raised. For the first time since arriving at the nursing home, I didn't feel only sorrow. I felt power, raw and dangerous, rising within me. I sat in my room that night staring at the artificial flowers on the nightstand, their plastic petals mocking the roses I had once tended with love. I whispered to myself, "She thinks I am finished. She thinks she has already buried me." But I was not finished. I thought of the will, tucked away where she didn't know. I thought of the choices still mine to make. My voice, though aged, was not silenced. My mind, though weary, was sharp, and my heart, though bruised, still burned with fire. She believed she had secured her victory, but she had only planted the seeds of her downfall. I rose, pacing the small room, each step steadying me. Betrayal had broken me once, but now it would build me anew. If Clara wanted my house, my life, my legacy as her prize, she would discover that inheritance is not something seized, it is something earned. And she had earned nothing but the weight of her own greed. I sat at the desk, pulled out a piece of paper, and began to write, not with despair, but with resolve. My pen scratched fiercely across the page, each word a quiet rebellion, each sentence a step toward reclaiming what was mine. Because this was no longer just about me. It was about every mother abandoned, every father forgotten, every elder treated as disposable once their usefulness faded. It was about showing Clara and everyone, like her, that betrayal has consequences. When I finally set down the pen, my hands no longer trembled. My sadness had transformed into something stronger, something sharper. For the first time since Clara had left me here, I smiled not with joy, but with the grim satisfaction of a woman who had just decided she would not go quietly. Clara thought she had written the ending of my story, but she had only written the beginning of hers. Sleep eluded me that night. The nursing home had grown quiet, the hum of televisions silenced, the halls dimmed to a soft glow, but my mind churned with restless energy. Clara's words echoed over and over, her laugh slicing through my thoughts. "The house is practically mine." No, it wasn't. Not yet. What she didn't know, what she had never even thought to ask, was that years ago, after my husband's death, I had taken steps to protect what little we had built. I had sat in a lawyer's office, weary but determined, and signed a will that didn't place everything neatly into my daughter's hands. At the time, it wasn't mistrust that guided me, but caution. My husband had always said, "Prepare for storms you can't see coming." Now, as the storm of betrayal raged around me, I was grateful for that foresight. The will was tucked safely away with our attorney, a quiet man named Mr. Whitaker, who had been a friend to my husband. He was discreet, trustworthy, the kind of man who still believed in honor. Clara had no idea he even existed in this story, because I had kept his name tucked away from her ambitious ears. I sat by the narrow desk in my room, running my fingers over the grain of the cheap wood, and I remembered a night, long ago, when my husband and I had spoken of legacies. We were in the kitchen, the light dim, the children asleep, the bills spread out before us like a battlefield. He had placed his hand over mine and said, "One day, our daughter will inherit what we've built. But listen to me, Mary, True heirs deserve, not demand. They honor what they're given, not snatch it out of your hands. I had smiled then, dismissing his words as overly cautious, but now, decades later, they returned with the clarity of prophecy. Clara was not an heir, she was a taker, and I would not let her steal what she hadn't earned. I began to think carefully, step by step. Clara believed she had stripped me of control, but she underestimated me. I still held the pen that would decide the fate of everything she coveted: the house, the savings, even the small collection of heirloom strings, letters, photographs that held more worth in love than in money. The power was still mine. I realized then how silent power often is. Clara thought strength meant signing papers, seizing keys, transferring accounts. But true strength is quiet, patient, waiting for the moment when it is needed most. The next morning, I asked one of the younger nurses if I could make a phone call. She smiled politely, leading me to the small booth tucked at the end of the hall. My fingers shook as I dialed, not from fear but from the weight of what this call represented. Whitaker and Associates, came the familiar voice of the secretary. "This is Mary Thompson," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I need to speak with Mr. Whitaker. It's urgent." Within minutes, his warm, measured tone came through the receiver. "Mary, it's been too long. How are you holding up?" I swallowed hard. "I'm managing, but I need to discuss my will. It's time for some changes." There was a pause. Then his voice softened with understanding. "I see. Do you want to set an appointment? I can come to you, if needed." "Yes," I whispered, glancing down the hall to make sure no one overheard. "Come here, quietly, and bring the papers." When I hung up, a calm resolve settled over me. Clara thought she had buried me under paperwork and routine, but I was about to remind her that the game wasn't finished. That evening, as the other residents watched television, I pulled out a notebook I had tucked in my drawer. I began to write not letters of sorrow this time, but lists: who would truly honor what we had built, who would cherish the house, the memories, the sacrifices woven into its walls. My mind drifted to my late husband's niece, Sarah, kind-hearted woman, who had visited me faithfully through the years, bringing casseroles and laughter even when Clara had grown distant. Or perhaps a charity that provided scholarships for children, something that would ensure my sacrifices lived on in others. Anything, I thought grimly, but Clara. The more I wrote, the stronger I felt. My grief had been heavy chains, but with each word, I forged keys instead. The next day, Mr. Whitaker arrived. He was older now, his hair white at the temples, but his eyes still sharp. We sat in the small lounge off the side hall, away from curious ears. He listened as I explained, nodding slowly, his pen poised. "She believes she already owns it," I told him, my voice hardening. "But she doesn't, and she won't. Then we'll make sure of it," he said simply. We went over every detail: the house, the savings account she hadn't discovered, even the heirlooms tucked away in storage. With each clause, with each signature, I felt my strength returning. This wasn't merely paperwork, it was justice, written in ink. When it was done, he folded the documents neatly, slipping them back into his case. "You've done the right thing, Mary. You've taken back your voice." I thanked him quietly, my heart steady. That night, I slept better than I had in weeks. For the first time, the shadows on the ceiling didn't mock me. They seemed to bow, acknowledging a woman who had found her footing again. Clara still thought she had one. She would visit again with her polished nails and impatient sighs, convinced she held all the strings. She wouldn't see the truth until it was far too late. And when that moment came, when she realized the prize she coveted had slipped through her grasp, she would understand the lesson my husband had spoken all those years ago. True heirs deserve, not demand. I would make sure of it. The next morning, I joined Margaret and Henry in the common room. They looked at me curiously, sensing the shift in my demeanor. "You're smiling," Margaret observed, raising an eyebrow. "Am I?" I asked lightly. Henry leaned forward. "Looks like someone's found a secret." I chuckled softly, shaking my head. "Not a secret, just a reminder that even when they think they've taken everything, we still have something left." "What's that?" Margaret asked. "Choice," I said firmly. "We still have choice." They nodded slowly, as though savoring the word. In that moment, I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting for all of us who had been cast aside, all of us whose children saw only inheritance and not love. My small rebellion was a torch in the dark, and I intended to carry it high. Clara would never see it coming. Clara arrived unannounced one Saturday morning, her heels clicking against the linoleum floors of the nursing home like impatient gavel strikes. I was sitting near the window, watching the faint sunlight filter through the blinds, when I heard her sharp voice speaking to the receptionist. Moments later, she appeared in my doorway, holding a slim folder tucked under her arm. "Mother," she said, forcing a smile that didn't touch her eyes. "We need to talk." I sighed. "Of course, you never visit just to see me, do you?" Her smile cracked, irritation flickering across her polished face. "Don't start. This is important." She sat down opposite me, opening the folder. I caught a glimpse of papers, lines of numbers, highlighted sections. My stomach tightened. "What is it this time?" I asked quietly. "The accounts," she said briskly. "You still have that joint savings with Dad's old pension fund. It's just sitting there, collecting dust. It would be smarter to move it under my name, consolidate everything, less hassle, fewer taxes." I stared at her. "So that's why you're here?" Clara rolled her eyes. "Don't make this dramatic. I'm trying to handle things for you. You don't need to worry about money anymore. This place covers everything you need." My voice sharpened. "Everything I need." "Clara, do you even hear yourself? I'm still alive. I'm not some abandoned relic to be stored away while you tally numbers." Her lips thinned. "You always twist things. I'm doing this for efficiency, not greed." I leaned forward, my hands trembling not from weakness but from fury. "Efficiency. You've stripped me of my home, my independence, my dignity, and now you want the last of my accounts. Tell me, Clara, when will it be enough?" Her composure cracked. "Do you know what I've sacrificed for you? All those years growing up, watching my friends get cars, vacations, college trips, while I was stuck helping you pay bills. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" I froze, stunned by her words. "Humiliating," I whispered. "I worked 2 jobs so you could eat, so you could go to school, so you could stand on your own feet, and you call that humiliation?" Her eyes flashed with anger. "You think I don't remember you crying at night over rent? You think I wanted to live with secondhand clothes while everyone else flaunted designer bags? I've been behind my whole life because of your failures." The words struck like blows. Failures. That was what she saw when she looked at me. Not sacrifice, not love, but failure. I felt tears sting my eyes, but I blinked them back, refusing to give her that satisfaction. "If you see me as a burden, then maybe you should ask yourself who you've become. Because money may fill your bank account, Clara, but it will never fill the emptiness in your heart." She slammed her hand against the table. "Stop moralizing. You're clinging to scraps of control because you're afraid. You're just holding me back from finally living the life I deserve." The silence that followed was deafening. I saw her chest rising and falling with fury, her polished facade gone, replaced by something raw and ugly. Finally, I spoke, my voice steady. "I may be old, Clara, but I am not powerless, and you will not bully me into signing away what little I have left." Her eyes narrowed. "You think you can stop me? The law's on my side. I've already got the house, the utilities, everything else under my name. You can't keep dragging this out forever." I lifted my chin. "We'll see." She glared at me for a long moment before gathering her papers with a snap. "Fine, but don't expect me to waste my time visiting if you're going to be stubborn." With that, she turned and stormed out, her heels echoing down the hall until they faded. I sat back, my hands shaking, my chest heavy with grief and anger. Around me, the room felt colder, lonelier, but inside, something stronger was taking root. Each confrontation stripped away my sorrow and replaced it with fire. The next week, she came again, and again, the same battle unfolded. "You don't understand the responsibility I'm carrying," she shouted one afternoon, her voice loud enough to draw glances from passing staff. "You don't understand what responsibility means," I shot back. "Responsibility is staying when it's hard. Responsibility is giving instead of taking. Responsibility is love, Clarice, something you've long forgotten." Her face reddened, her fists clenching at her sides. "You always make yourself the saint. Maybe you were a good mother when I was a child, but now you're just selfish. You can't let go, let go." My laughter was bitter. "I already let go of everything for you, my dreams, my health, my future, and this is what I get in return." Her jaw tightened. "You act like I owe you my entire life. Well, I don't. I won't be chained to your past." The words stung, but I saw through them. She wasn't fighting for freedom, she was fighting for control. When she left that day, I stayed seated long after, my breath shaky, my heart pounding. Yet, beneath the ache, a strange calm emerged. These showdowns were no longer breaking me, they were clarifying me. For every cruel word, I had a truth sharper than any weapon. For every accusation, I had the weight of sacrifice behind me. And when the time came, Clara would learn that moral ground isn't just a phrase, it is unshakable. It is the difference between inheriting ashes and inheriting honor. I closed my eyes, hearing my husband's voice in memory. True heirs deserve, not demand. Yes, I thought, the storm was far from over. But I would not bow. Not now, not ever. The days after Clara's outbursts were heavy but strangely clarifying. I no longer pretended she might soften with time. Each visit revealed her hunger more clearly, her mask slipping piece by piece. Yet in that darkness, fate placed someone in my path I had not expected. Her name was Evelyn. She was one of the younger staff members at the nursing home, no more than 30, with quick eyes and a softness in her voice that carried no pity, only respect. Most aides moved through their shifts briskly, focused on tasks, but Evelyn lingered. She asked questions, listened to stories, and never once spoke to me like I was a fragile relic. One evening, after Clara had left in a storm of accusations, Evelyn knocked gently on my door. "Mind if I come in?" I nodded, still trembling from the confrontation. She set down a tray of tea and biscuits. I couldn't help overhearing, a little, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to pry, but you sounded hurt." A humorless laugh escaped me. Hurt doesn't begin to cover it. Betrayed is closer. My own daughter treats me like a ledger to balance. Evelyn sat across from me, her brows knitting. "It happens more often than you'd think. Families fighting over money. Forgetting the person at the center of it all." Her words carried no judgment, only understanding. For the first time in weeks, I felt seen. I told her fragments of my story, how I had raised Clara alone, how I had sacrificed everything, how Clara had maneuvered me into this place. Evelyn listened silently, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze steady. When I finished, she said quietly, "You don't deserve that, and you don't have to let her win." The words caught me off guard. "What do you mean?" She hesitated, then leaned closer. "Before I worked here, I spent years helping my aunt through an inheritance battle. She was being manipulated by family too, pressured to sign away rights she didn't even realize she had. A good lawyer turned the tide. I still have his contact. If you'd like, I could connect you." My breath caught. Here was the thread of hope I hadn't dared imagine. Would that really help me? "Yes," Evelyn said firmly. "If your will is updated and airtight, Clara can't undo it. But you need someone who knows how to close every loophole." A spark lit inside me. It was one thing to cling to principle, but with Evelyn's help, I could build something unshakable. The next week, under the guise of a family friend visiting, Evelyn arranged for her lawyer contact Mr. Patel to stop by. He was a sharp, composed man in his 40s, with a calmness that seemed to settle the air around him. We met in the small visitors' lounge, Evelyn at my side. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, shaking my hand warmly. "Evelyn's told me a little. Why don't you start from the beginning?" So I did. I laid bare the story of Clara's maneuvering, the accounts, the threats, the way she circled like a hawk over every scrap of my life. His eyes narrowed slightly, but he didn't interrupt. When I finished, he said, "You've already made changes to your will with Mr. Whitaker, correct?" "Yes, but I fear Clara's persistence. She might try to challenge it." He nodded. "Then we fortify it. We'll add provisions that are nearly impossible to contest, specific reasons for disinheritance, alternate beneficiaries, notarized witness statements. We'll also move certain assets into a trust, which bypasses probate entirely. Even if she hires the best lawyer, she'll find nothing to tear down." A shiver ran through me, not of fear, but of awe. I had thought my only weapon was silence and patience. But here, with Evelyn and Mr. Patel, I was learning that justice had tools sharper than Clara's greed. Over the next few days, arrangements were made discreetly. Evelyn would schedule my meetings during slow hours, covering for me so staff wouldn't gossip. Mr. Patel drafted the new documents, ensuring every word shielded me. Together, we built a fortress on paper. But what struck me most wasn't the legal process, it was Evelyn herself. She became more than an aide. She became a confidant. She reminded me of the daughter I had wished for. Not perfect, not without flaws, but kind, loyal, rooted in empathy. One night, as we sat sharing tea again, I said softly, "You didn't have to help me." "Why did you?" Evelyn smiled faintly. "Because my aunt didn't have anyone." I watched her cry, thinking she was powerless, and I promised myself if I ever saw someone in that same place, I'd step in. No one deserves to be treated like a burden. Her words lodged deep in my heart. For years I had told myself I was alone, that Clara's coldness was my punishment for being a but here was proof that love and loyalty could still exist, even from unexpected places. The suspense tightened each time Clara visited, unaware of the walls rising around her. She still pushed papers toward me, still demanded signatures, still spat accusations when I refused. Yet I sat calmer now, a quiet smile tugging at my lips, because I knew something she didn't. The inheritance she coveted was slipping from her grasp with every passing day. One afternoon, after she stormed out in a fury, Evelyn leaned against the doorframe of my room. "She doesn't know, does she?" "No," I said, allowing myself a small grin. "And she won't, not until it's too late." Evelyn nodded approvingly. "Good, let her think she's winning. That will make the ending even sharper." I closed my notebook, where I had begun drafting letters to accompany my will, explaining my choices not only to Clara but to anyone who would read, letters that told the truth of sacrifice, betrayal, and justice. The final act was coming closer. I could feel it like a storm on the horizon, heavy with thunder. But this time, I wasn't trembling. This time, I had an ally. The confrontation came on a rainy Sunday afternoon, the kind where the skies pressed low against the earth and every window shivered with the storm's temper. Clara barged into the nursing home with her usual force, umbrella dripping, heels clacking against the floor. I was in the lounge, a book open in my lap, when she appeared like a shadow across the room. "Mother," she said, voice sharp as glass, "we need to settle this once and for all." I closed the book calmly, marking my page with deliberate slowness. "Good afternoon, Clara," determined. Her lips curved into a triumphant smile. She dropped a folder onto the table with a theatrical snap. "It's over. I've moved the utilities, redirected the mail, and filed for full authority over the accounts. All that's left is your signature to tidy up the last pieces. And when that's done, everything is mine." Her eyes glittered with satisfaction, the kind that comes from believing the game is already won. She leaned back, folding her arms like a queen surveying conquered land. I studied her for a long moment, my expression unreadable. Finally, I said softly, "Everything, you say?" "Yes," she replied, her tone smug. "The house, the accounts, the heirlooms, everything that matters. I've worked too hard to let anything slip through my fingers. So please, don't make this difficult. Just sign." Her arrogance hung heavy in the air, daring me to comply. I set the book aside and leaned forward. "Clara, do you remember what your father used to say about true heirs?" She frowned, clearly annoyed. "Mother, not this again. He's been gone for decades. His words don't change the law. His words change everything," I said quietly, "because they're about character, about what it means to deserve something, not simply demand it." She rolled her eyes. "This is exactly why I had to step in. You cling to old sayings instead of reality. The reality is, I've secured everything. You can't stop me anymore." I allowed myself a small, measured smile. "Are you sure about that?" Her confidence faltered for the briefest second. "What do you mean?" I reached into my desk drawer and pulled out a thin envelope. Evelyn had helped me keep it close, just for this moment. I placed it on the table between us. Clara eyed it with suspicion. "What's this?" "The truth," I said simply. She tore it open, scanning the pages with increasing urgency. As her eyes darted line to line, her triumphant smirk withered, color drained from her face. "This," she stammered, "this isn't possible." "Oh, but it is," I replied calmly. "Mr. Whitaker and Mr. Patel made sure of it. The will has been rewritten. Every account, every asset, every possession you thought belonged to you, it's all secured, and none of it will go to you." Her hands trembled, the paper rattling like dry leaves. "What do you mean, none?" I leaned back, my voice steady, cutting through her panic. "The house will go to Sarior, cousin who actually visited me when no one else did. The savings will go into a scholarship fund for children who grow up without parents, just as you once did. The heirlooms will be preserved in trust, never to be sold off for a quick profit. And you, Clara," I let the silence linger, sharp as a blade, "you will receive nothing." Her mouth opened in shock, then snapped shut as rage replaced disbelief. "You can't do this to me," she shouted, drawing glances from staff nearby. "I'm your daughter. This is my inheritance." I met her fury with calm. "No, Clara. Inheritance is a gift, not a guarantee, and gifts are earned, not stolen. You showed me nothing but contempt, greed, and betrayal. So I chose differently. I chose justice." Her face twisted, crimson with humiliation. "You're punishing me because I wanted a better life. Because I refused to wallow in poverty like you did. You're being punished, I said firmly, because you valued wealth over love, because you saw me not as a mother, but as an obstacle. You may have thought me weak, tucked away in this home, but I had power. You never imagined the power to decide my own legacy. Her voice cracked with desperation. Everyone will think you're cruel. They'll say, you abandoned your own child. I shook my head slowly. No. They'll say, I finally saw you clearly. And perhaps, one day, you'll see yourself as clearly as I do now. For a moment, silence stretched between us, taut as wire. Clara's chest heaved, her knuckles white as she crumpled the papers in her fists. Around us, the storm outside lashed against the windows, thunder rolling like judgment. Finally, she hissed, you'll regret this. I stood, frail but unshaken, my voice rising with steel. No, Clara, you'll regret this. You had everything, a mother's love, years of sacrifice, a home built with blood and sweat, and you threw it away. That regret will follow you far longer than any will or inheritance ever could. Her eyes burned with fury, but beneath the fire was something else. Fear. She had built her entire world on the assumption that she held all the cards. Now, the deck lay scattered, and she was powerless to gather it again. She stormed out, papers still clenched in her hand, her heels striking like angry hammers against the floor. I watched her go, a strange calm washing over me. Evelyn slipped into the lounge, her face a mixture of concern and curiosity. Did it happen? I nodded. She knows now, and she's furious, I said with a faint smile. But she can't undo it. It's finished. Evelyn placed a gentle hand on my shoulder. Then you've won, I exhaled, the weight of weeks lifting from my chest. Yes, I had won, not with shouting, not with force, but with quiet, deliberate justice. Clara had tried to strip me of dignity, but in the end, I had reclaimed more than dignity. I had reclaimed my voice, my legacy, my truth. That night, as I lay in bed, I listened to the storm's fading echoes. For the first time in years, I felt peace, not because I had defeated Clara, but because I had honored myself, my husband's words, and the sacrifices of a lifetime. Justice had been served, not in fire or fury, but in ink, patience, and courage. And though Clara's rage would surely burn bright for a time, the truth would outlast her anger. My legacy was safe. My heart, though scarred, was steady. She thought she had buried me. Instead, I had buried her greed. The door slammed behind Clara with a violence that rattled the frame. Her footsteps thundered down the corridor until they faded into nothing, leaving only the sound of rain trickling against the windows. I stood there for a moment, my hands resting lightly on the armrest of the chair. My chest ached not with the weakness of age, but with the raw ache of motherhood denied. A part of me still wanted to call her back, to reach out and tell her that no matter how far she strayed, she would always be my daughter. But the words froze in my throat. The truth was bitter but undeniable. I had lost her long ago, not to death, but to greed. When I finally sank back into the chair, Evelyn returned quietly, her presence steady, like a candle in the storm. She placed a cup of tea in front of me without a word. I wrapped my hands around it, grateful for the warmth. She's gone, I whispered. Evelyn nodded softly. For now, maybe forever. The words pierced, but they were also honest. I stared at the steam rising from my cup, curling like ghosts of all the conversations I once imagined I would have with Clara, dreams of her confiding in me, bringing me her joys, letting me share in her struggles. Instead, I had been reduced to a signature, a vault, a stumbling block. A tear slipped down my cheek, but I did not wipe it away. Tears, I realized, were not weakness. They were proof that my love had been real, that my sacrifices had meant something, even if Clara refused to see it. I gave her everything, I murmured, my time, my strength, my dreams, and she saw only what she didn't have. Evelyn placed her hand over mine, firm and grounding. And you gave her something else, too true. That's a gift she may not understand now, but one day, she might. I doubted it. Though a mother's heart always clings to hope, however faint. That evening, I sat in the common room with the others. The rain had passed, leaving behind a hush that felt almost sacred. Mr. Daniels, the former school teacher with a failing memory, was telling the same story about his first classroom. Beside him, Mrs. Alvarez laughed at her own joke for the third time in 10 minutes. Once, I might have dismissed these conversations as noise, but tonight, I listened differently. These people, broken in their own ways, were still present, still kind, still capable of giving something Clara had refused. Companionship without condition, Mrs. Alvarez leaned over with a grin. You look lighter tonight, dear. Did something happen? I smiled faintly. Something ended, and something else began. She patted my hand. That's life, isn't it? Always endings, always beginnings. I looked around the circle, faces marked by age, hands trembling, eyes dimming, yet there was resilience here, a kind of quiet bravery. We were all survivors of something. Perhaps, in their company, I could learn to live again, not as Clara's discarded mother but as my own person. Days turned into weeks. Clara did not return. The silence of her absence was both a wound and a balm. I grieved the daughter I had lost, but in her absence, space opened for something unexpected. Peace. Evelyn encouraged me to join small activities, painting classes, book discussions, even a gentle yoga session that made my joints ache but my spirit laugh. At first, I resisted, still mourning too heavily, but with each passing day, I felt myself stretch into new forms of belonging. I began to share my story with others. Some listened quietly, nodding in recognition of familiar betrayals. Others offered their own tales of sons and daughters who had vanished once money was settled. We were, in a way, a community of broken hearts, yet, in sharing the pain, we discovered solidarity. One evening, as I sat watching the sun dip low through the courtyard windows, Evelyn joined me again. You've changed, she said simply. How so? You walk taller, you smile more, you're free, in a way. I thought about that. Free, yes, but at a cost. Freedom always costs something, Evelyn replied gently. You gave up the illusion of what Clara might be. Now you're left with reality. And, though it hurts, it also gives you the strength to build something new. Her words lingered in me, like seeds waiting for soil. One afternoon, I received a letter in the mail. My hands shook as I opened it, recognizing Clara's handwriting. For a moment, I hoped, just for a moment, that she had written to apologize, to reach across the divide. But the words inside were bitter, scrawled in fury. She accused me of cruelty, of betrayal, of destroying her future. She promised I would die alone. I folded the letter carefully and placed it in the drawer, alongside the will. For once, I did not cry. I only whispered to the empty room, You've already lost me, Clara, and I've already found myself. The next morning, I woke with a strange clarity. For years, my identity had been bound to Clara, to raising her, to providing for her, to grieving her distance. Now, I was something else, a woman who had endured, who had reclaimed dignity, who had survived betrayal and emerged whole. At breakfast, I joined the table with Mrs. Alvarez, Mr. Daniels, and a few others. Someone cracked a joke about the porridge being more like glue than food, and laughter erupted around the table. I laughed, to genuine laughter, the kind that shook loose something long buried inside me. It struck me then, I was not alone. Not anymore. That night, as I lay in bed, I whispered to the quiet, I loved you, Clara, more than life itself. But love cannot live where it is not wanted. So I set it free, and I set myself free too. The moonlight spilled across the room, silver and gentle. My heart, though scarred, beat with new steadiness. Clara's absence would always ache, but it no longer defined me. I had reclaimed more than a legacy. I had reclaimed my soul. The seasons shifted quietly, as they always do, unbothered by human heartbreak. Leaves outside the nursing home turned golden, then brittle, then finally scattered into winter's hush. Time kept moving, carrying me with it, smoothing the jagged edges of pain into something more bearable, something almost tender. I often found myself sitting by the window, watching life unfold. Young families passed the garden with strollers and children clutching their parents' hands. I would smile at them, remembering the years when Clara's small hand fit so trustingly in mine. I had once thought those moments guaranteed a bond unbreakable, a future secured by love. How wrong I was. But here, in the quiet reflection of my final years, I began to see the truth more clearly than ever. Wealth could be stolen, manipulated, fought over, but respect, gratitude, and love could never be forced. They had to be freely given, and in the absence of those things, even the largest inheritance turned to dust. I thought often of my late husband. He had warned me in his gentle way, true heirs deserve, not demand. Legacy is more than property, it's the spirit you pass on. Back then, I had nodded, thinking I understood. But it took Clara's betrayal for those words to fully blossom inside me. She had believed that money was the prize, that by pushing me away, by silencing me, by claiming control, She had won, yet she lost far more than she could ever imagine. She lost her mother's blessing. She lost the pride of carrying forward a family's honor. She lost the simple, irreplaceable comfort of knowing she was loved without condition. And I, though stripped of a house, of possessions, of the illusion of her loyalty, had gained something Clara could not touch. I had regained dignity. I had regained clarity. I had reclaimed the choice to decide what my life and my legacy would mean. Sometimes, the residents asked me why I looked so peaceful, even after all that had happened. "Aren't you angry?" one woman asked. Angry? I considered the word once, yes, but anger is a fire that consumes the hand holding it. I will not let it burn the last of my days. Instead, I choose peace. For that is the great irony of betrayal. The betrayer believes they hold the power. Yet in truth, they chain themselves. Clara was shackled by greed, bound to a hunger that would never be satisfied. I, in contrast, was free. When the will was finally read, it made the local paper. My estate was modest compared to the fortunes of others, but it was enough to turn heads. I had left the house, the savings, and the bonds not to Clara, but to a scholarship fund for young single mothers, struggling as I once did. The reporter called it an act of quiet defiance and generosity. I called it justice, because my story was not just about punishing Clara. It was about ensuring that sacrifice and perseverance, the very values I had lived, would continue to bear fruit. Somewhere, a young mother would keep her child fed. Somewhere, a little girl would know the safety of a home. Somewhere, dignity would be preserved. That was worth far more than letting greed rot my legacy. Of course, Clara was furious. I heard whispers that she screamed when she discovered the truth, that she cursed my name. But curses carry little weight against a clear conscience. What she did not realize was that by grasping for everything, she had ended up with nothing. And therein lay the lesson I wished every child could learn. Inheritance is not measured in coins or deeds. Inheritance is measured in pride, in respect, in gratitude. To betray those who gave everything for you is to cut the very roots that feed your life. No wealth can compensate for the emptiness left behind. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the horizon in colors too rich for words, I gathered a few of the younger staff members around. They often asked me for advice, curious about the life I had lived. I told them my story, not with bitterness, but with the calm of one who has survived. I spoke of sacrifice, of loss, of betrayal, and then I spoke of dignity, of legacy, of what truly endures. Remember this, I said gently, looking at their eager faces. Money disappears, property crumbles, even beauty fades, but love given, respect earned, and gratitude expressed, those are the treasures that last. Guard them fiercely, for they are worth more than any inheritance. One young nurse wiped a tear. Another whispered, "I'll remember that when I go home to my mother tonight." And in that moment, I knew my legacy was already alive, not in wealth, but in wisdom. The days that followed were quieter, yet not lonely. I painted more, laughed more, even sang once or twice with Mrs. Alvarez during our afternoon gatherings. The ache of Clara's absence never left, but it softened, no longer sharp enough to wound. Instead, I carried her in memory, a caution, a prayer, a reminder that even love can be lost when gratitude is forgotten. I could not change her choices, but I could ensure her betrayal bore fruit in the lessons I shared with others. And that, too, was a kind of triumph. In my final reflections, I came to see my life not as a tragedy, but as a testament. I had endured hardship, given love, faced betrayal, and still found a way to reclaim dignity. My story, though painful, was not wasted. It was a mirror for others, a beacon for those who might one day face the same crossroads between greed and gratitude. So when I whispered my last prayer at night, it was not for wealth, nor even for reconciliation. It was simply this: may those who come after me learn to honor what they are given. May they understand that the greatest inheritance is not gold, but grace. And so, my legacy is not a house, nor money, nor name engraved in stone. My legacy is the truth I leave behind. Children who betray for wealth lose both family and fortune, but children who honor sacrifice inherit something greater than any will: pride, dignity, and love that endures beyond death. This is the inheritance that never fades. This is the legacy that cannot be stolen. And with that knowledge, I found peace. Quiet, steady, unshakable peace.